When I first graduated from high school, my parents, as well as a lot of other family members, gave me a lot of money. I got about $1,800 from all of my family members as a graduation gift, and it seemed great at the time. I also had a college fund that my parents had started before I was even born that had about $2,000 in it. So I went off to college with about $3,000. Now, I'd never had this much money before, ever, so I had no idea what to do with it. So, like any college student who has just come into a fair bit of money did, I spent all of it. Shoes, AirPods, clothes, you name it, and I probably spent money on it. And because I didn't have a budget, a solid budget to help me distribute the finances responsibly, that entire $3,000 was gone in about 2 or 3 months, which seems crazy. How could anybody spend $3,000 in 2 months? Well, I did, and it was because I didn't have a budget. Budgets are so important for financial stability as well as financial security. If you don't have a stable budget, it's going to be very difficult for you to be able to organize your finances in a way that you know where all of your money is going and that you'll be able to properly prepare for savings and debt as well as all of your expenses. So in today's video, we're going to talk about the top 5 budgeting methods, and we're going to try and figure out which one is going to be right for you in your particular situation, because each budgeting method is a little bit different and works for a little bit of a different person. So let's get into it. All right, so first we're going to talk about the zero-based budget. The premise of this budget is pretty simple. It's income minus expenses equals 0. This budget is definitely ideal for somebody who has a fixed income every month because it makes it a lot easier to track and record all of your expenses. The one downside of this is it's a pretty strict budgeting method, which means you have to track your expenses very, very closely. Credit, debit, cash, it all needs to be really organized so that you can zero out that balance every single month and have no money left over. For this budget to work, it's ideal for you to have your expenses planned out as accurately as possible. So your fixed expenses such as your rent, utilities, car payments, that kind of thing, definitely have that planned out, but also make sure that you're planning for other variable or irregular expenses such as car insurance that might pop up every 6 months, medical expenses, anything like that. Have a separate emergency fund for that you're allocating a little bit of money to every single month so that you have a safety net just in case something happens. If you're prone to overspending like I am and impulse spending, this budget might not be the best for you because overspending in one category, even a little bit, can throw the entire budget off. Before you decide to implement this budget, it might be a good idea to try recording and tracking your expenses for about 3 months before, just so you can kind of get a feel for having to really closely monitor all of those expenses and see if it's something that's doable for you. This is definitely better for somebody who doesn't use credit as often because credit purchases are a lot more variable and irregular in that you might not account for the interest that accrues at the end of every month if you're not paying more than the minimum payment every month. A benefit to this budget is that it is pretty customizable, so it doesn't have to be as black and white as income minus expenses equals 0. So you can disperse the money a little bit differently. Some can go into an emergency fund, some can go into investments, some can go into retirement, some can go into an education fund for your children. It's really all up to you. So you really determine where it goes every month as long as at the end you have a 0 balance, so all of your money has gone somewhere. All right, next we're going to talk about the pay yourself first budget, which is also pretty simple in that it mostly focuses on savings and debt repayment. So how this budget works is that you set aside a certain amount every month for savings and debt, and all of the rest of the money that you have left over is for you to use as you see fit pretty much. When you're first starting out with this budget, I would recommend focusing on your credit cards or debt that has the highest interest and also build an emergency fund right alongside that. And while it's still important to allocate funds towards your expenses, such as your rent, your utilities, your car payments, all of that, you don't have as much stress because you've already allocated the money that's going into the important places, savings and debt. So this budget is really perfect for somebody who's really focused on savings and paying off their debt. Again, if you're prone to overspending or impulse spending like I am, it might be a little difficult because it does take some self-control to allocate enough money towards savings and debt that it makes sense and it'll actually help you financially. All right, next we're going to talk about the envelope system budget. This budget is really similar to the zero-based budget, except for everything is done with cash. So how this budget works is you're still tracking your expenses every month. However, all those expenses are going to be organized into cash envelopes. So the premise of that is when you need the money for whatever it is, rent, car payment, groceries, you take out the envelope and take out the cash that's in it, and that's it. That's all you get for that specific category. You should really avoid taking cash out of other categories to cover an area that you have overspent in, and that's why it's a good idea to really get a handle on overspending and impulse spending if you have an issue with that before attempting to use this budgeting method. This budgeting method is definitely the best for somebody who is really comfortable using cash and isn't super used to using credit and debit cards. If you're more used to using credit and debit cards, there's probably another budgeting method that's better for you. The cash is just almost really to help regulate your spending, especially through credit cards, because if you're not using the credit cards, you're not able to get yourself into credit card debt, and it's just a lot easier to keep everything organized. And the envelope system is great because what's in the envelope is what you get for that category, and it's a lot more difficult to overspend because what you have is what you get for that. All right, now we're gonna talk about a really popular budgeting method called the 50-30-20 method. And this budgeting method is pretty simple in that 50% of your income is gonna go towards your needs, 30% is gonna go towards your wants, and then 20% is gonna go towards your savings and debt. This budgeting method is great for beginners because you don't actually have to track each individual expense. It's just a percentage. However, this method is not really ideal for somebody who's focusing on savings and debt because 20% is not a lot to distribute into that area. However, the good thing is you can always change around the percentages to match your needs a little bit more, so it's a really customizable budgeting method. All right, and now we're gonna talk about a budgeting method called the no method. The main idea of this budgeting method is to not spend money that you do not have. This budgeting method definitely focuses on self-discipline. So again, if you have issues with overspending or impulse spending, this probably isn't the best method for you because you have to be really, really disciplined about telling yourself no to a lot of things. You'll need to keep an eye on your checking account balance. You can use an app like Mint to help you do that. It'll have all of your expenses lined up in one place. You'll need to memorize when recurring bills are gonna hit your account. And with a lot of companies, you can actually set the date that you'd like to be charged so that you can have them all on the same day, so you just know which day it's gonna be on for all of them. You'll wanna automate your savings and debt payments so that they're pulled directly out of your checking account without you even having to think about it. And finally, with the leftover, you'll just wanna make sure that you are able to spend what you have left without overdrafting your account because that can incur some pretty nasty fees. While this method is a lot easier than other methods, it requires a lot of self-control. Like I said, this budget is really not ideal for somebody who has impulsivity issues. It's definitely best to use a debit card when dealing with this budget because all of your payments and expenses are going to be automated and they're just going to be pulled directly out of your checking account automatically. This budgeting method isn't technically a budget per se, it's just you keeping a really close eye on your expenses and where your money is going every single month. You really have to dig deep with this one and look at what you're spending money on and trying to figure out the difference between the needs and the wants and cutting out a lot of the wants so that you're not spending more money than you have. Learning how to do this will avoid putting you in really bad situations like getting a really bad credit card debt. I got myself into really bad credit card debt because I was spending way more money than I had. And I dug myself a pretty deep hole. Luckily, I have really understanding parents who helped me out, and so now I'm paying them back at 0 interest instead of paying the credit card companies at 26% interest. So I got a good deal, but not everybody's so lucky. So definitely make sure that you are using credit cards as little as possible, especially when you're budgeting, because it's a really variable expense that you can avoid pretty easily. All right, so those are the top 5 budgeting methods. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Let me know which budgeting method you think is going to be the best for you. I'm really excited to hear what you all have to say. I hope you really enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys on the next one.